what's the focus? The focus of this whole process was developed when I was out selling, and I was selling security stuff, but I was supporting and selling with other people who are selling all kinds of stuff: data center, storage, IP telephony, networking, all kinds of stuff, even application development. And in fact, you can use security to get into the door, to access the decision makers in a way that you just cannot do with other kinds of technology. You know, the CIO doesn't want to talk about storage, but if it's the latest and greatest thing, sometimes they will talk about it. But security just seems to always be top of mind. But there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect between what's the messaging of the organization and what the salespeople are trying to do. And a lot of times, the people that I meet on the sales side of the organization are just making lots and lots of calls. In fact, I was on the phone with a guy the other day, and his company has some really cool technology. They deal with security trends and threat analysis to create information that allows people to have I'm probably butchering this, and that person's probably going to listen to this, but they are creating the intelligence that an organization needs to defend themselves in a proactive way, getting away from perimeter security and getting away from compliance-oriented security and getting focused on what's happening and what's relevant to that organization and being able to make proactive decisions about what to do. And when those decisions get made, it's more than just defending the company. It's messaging to the customers, like when Target got hit. You know, there's a whole sequence of events that have to take place that's kind of immediate. And the more proactive you can be and the more intelligence you've got, the better you're going to be. And that's what his company does. But there's a disconnect in the way that those things get messaged and what those salespeople end up doing. And a lot of the salespeople that I work with in my peak performers group are making tons and tons of cold calls, and they're not getting to the people that really matter. And so the message is important. The marketing is important. And if you look at companies like Cisco, Oracle, IBM, these companies have had strong marketing and have sustained themselves. They've grown. They've gotten big. They're huge. We could add HP up here as well. And of course, they're getting very involved in security right now if you watch anything they're doing. But when you look at companies like Wellfleet, who used to compete with Cisco and used to be the same size as Cisco, they're gone. Why? Because they didn't have good marketing, and there were some other issues there. But they were built by engineers. Good technology, no marketing. I heard the other day, 80% or 85% of the product decisions that are made are already made when they call you. They've already gone out to Google, they've already done their research, and now they are shopping. They're shopping for what? They're shopping for the best price. But when you go after the 95%, the people that don't need anything, you need something that you know they need, but they don't know they need. Okay, let me say that again. You need something that they don't know they need, but you know they do need. It's got to be predictable is what I call it. And one of the things I know they need, they being anybody, especially people who are in decision-making positions, they need security. Now, here's the problem. There's actually several problems. One is the selling process is just too technical. There's also a marketing issue. And the marketing issue is this disconnect between what marketing is doing in your organization and what the sales group is doing. And if you could just imagine if the marketing group had a strong, compelling message that everyone needed that could reach out to the 95%, move up the food chain, get to the people who make decisions, and compel them to meet with you, and you had qualified meetings, imagine how much easier selling would be. Now, we also have an assessment problem. There's a lot of times there's an assessment involved in a security business, and there should be. This is a great way to sell, and assessments really ought to convert 70 to 90% of the time, but most of them only convert about 20% of the time. And the reason that is, it's not because they're not urgent issues there, it's because the way it's packaged and delivered is not done correctly. Okay? And then the fourth issue is that the presentation is boring. And here's what it looks like. Okay? I go through this in quite a bit of detail in my Making Money with Security program, but it's also in my Vendor to Advisor class, where I talk about how presentations are structured today. Most of them say, here's my company, here's how big we are, here's what we have, here's the certifications we have, here's the products we sell, here's the people we've done business with, buy from us. And it's not that interesting. Okay, it's boring. But when we get in there with a compelling, predictably good presentation, messaging that's going to resonate, that's going to wake them up, and that's what the House in the Cloud was built for, to wake people up and to get them from sitting there passively to an urgent need. And that's why in the last 5 marketing events I did, following the Making Money with Security program and using the event marketing success kit strategy, we have converted 100% of the audience attendees. And these are decision maker people. These are above the director level attendees. And that program shows you how to get them there and how to move them to convert them into the process, into the assessment process, and then to convert them into projects and managed services. Now, how do we change all this? And here's where we want to focus in on the house in the cloud material. The house in the cloud is built on this concept of impact versus likelihood. And if you've been listening to me any time at all, you know I frequently refer to this graph. This is the reason why deals get held up, because everyone is out there focusing on impact. They're talking to their clients about what would be bad if something went wrong. What would the impact be? You know, it'd be disastrous. You know, you'd lose this much money, or you know, you've got to do this, or else you're going to lose this. And the problem is the decision maker is sitting there, or a lot of times we're selling this to the influencer who really doesn't care about any of this. And when it gets bubbled up to the person who's going to make a decision, they're looking at the impacts and they're going, well, we know that, but what's the likelihood? What's the likelihood this is going to happen? Now, they don't go back to the salesperson and say, what's the likelihood? They say it to themselves. What's the likelihood? You know, what's the likelihood that I'm going to get in a car accident today? You know, it's that kind of thought. Do I really need to put my seatbelt on today? Is it okay if my 5-year-old sits in the front seat today because, like, there's no traffic and we're just driving down the road? You know, it's that kind of likelihood thinking. And the problem is they are ignorant as to what the real likelihood is, and this is what the salespeople ought to be focused on. When I go into a company with an assessment or a security discussion, I want to move them to want to know the likelihood. I want to show them why they need that, and I want to show them that I can get it for them. They understand the impact. I get that. It's bad. But if there's no likelihood, it doesn't matter. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show them a way to get to that likelihood, or at least a good estimate of what that likelihood looks like. And when I do that, and that's what the house in the cloud does, it creates that opportunity, then it leads to conversion. And if I really do the right kind of assessment, it will always lead to conversion. And I'll spend a little bit of time, I don't think I'll have a lot of time for that in this session, but in the Making Money with Security program, I go through about an hour on the assessment process and show how the assessment ought to be organized, how the deliverable should look, how the deliverable should be done, what data to collect, and even what kinds of questions to ask in the process and what to go through to gather the information you need to deliver that assessment. But who advises these executives on data risk, on data security? You know, IT doesn't. In fact, there was a great article in the Wall Street Journal not too long ago. Mike McConnell, who used to be an advisor to the White House, is talking about information security, and he recognizes there's a huge wall between IT and the executive management team. And he says in the article, this wall has to come down. But you know what? That is hopeful thinking, wishful thinking, but it's not going to happen. And having worked in IT for a long time, the barrier between IT and the executive management is big. And it's not coming down anytime soon. So who is going to advise the executives on risk mitigation? And it's got to be you. It's got to be the third-party person who can look in and see the issues and see the risk and help them, because they're not going to go to IT, and their compliance officer is not going to do it either. Now, the key ingredients to becoming that advisor are pretty simple. The trusted advisor must be what? Trusted. Well, that's, you know, it's one of those character issues that everyone just needs to develop, a trustworthiness. But then there's this ability to advise on things that matter. And so building expertise in understanding information security concepts is important. Now, I want to be quick to say this is not about the product. This is not about salespeople learning more about firewalls or reading the data sheets that come from the information security providers that you deal with. Let your engineers do that. Your consultants do that. What you should be thinking about is, what are the trends out there at the Wall Street Journal level? Critical. That is what makes the sale. That's what gets you away from the product and turns you into the consultative sale and creates that trusted advisor mentality. Now, number two, we've got to have predictive messaging. If we're going to be marketing successfully, good marketing is getting the right message to the right people at the right time. Security marketing is about content marketing. It's about information marketing. And so what we want to do is understand the concepts. And so there's a few of them on here. First of all, if we look at CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability, these are the three pillars of security. If something needs to have confidentiality, meaning it needs to stay private, it needs to remain confidential, like credit card numbers, account numbers, healthcare information, all those things are governed by federal standards like HIPAA and GLBA and Sarbanes-Oxley and other requirements out there. But really anything that a company considers to have a high need for confidentiality, like company secrets, for instance, is a security issue. It's conversion. It's all about conversion. And then I've got to have something to convert them to, and I love converting to an assessment at that point. In other words, let me get that person worried by giving them the facts, giving them the information, and then show them that I have a way to determine their impact likelihood. And that's the effective assessment process. Now, just any assessment is going to convert maybe 20% of the time. But see, that's not good. 20% of the time is lousy. It's a failure, in my opinion. I'm looking for 70, 80, 90% conversion. About that. What I'm trying to do here is create a vision with my audience by showing them the major issues that they have against the major assets that exist. So rather than looking at internal and external or networks and perimeter or in-node devices and something else, I'm looking at information. This is the most important information your company has. You told me that in the interview, this, and this, and you prioritized it for me, and they should have. They can do that. And then I've gone out and I've looked at how you work. I've looked at your workflow, your end users. I've looked at what they're computing on, their platforms, and how they compute, and how they interact with their clients, and the web services they use, the cloud services they use. You know, the average major enterprise company out there is operating on somewhere between 250 and 300 cloud applications today. So where's their data? They don't know. Well, I've done a lot of work with PwC, worked on projects with them, and I've done a lot of work with Accenture. And these are the things that I've seen. First of all, an assessment is a marketing tool. And what I mean by that is it's a way to get the right message to the right people at the right time. Okay? That's what marketing is, and that's what assessments do. And they convert when they're done properly. The advisor is there to develop a roadmap. Here we are now. Here's where we're going. They're selling a future, a result, not a methodology, not a product. And then they're associating their fees with the value that company is going to receive, and they're presenting it in a way that resonates with that group of people, with the people who are going to benefit from it, which is typically not IT. How do I get to these people? And that's where the House in the Cloud book really comes into play. And as I go through the presentation, this is what I'm doing in the Making Money with Security program. I am showing the salesperson how to put together the presentation and what principles behind that presentation actually cause it to convert that customer. So this is going to be a piece of what I actually use in the lunch and learns that I do. So if you have the Event Marketing Success Kit, which is also available on my website, in that kit, I actually show you how to construct the presentation and how to convert the people from sitting in their office to coming to the event, into an assessment, and then into a project, and then into managed services. Okay, that whole sequence of conversion is the Event Marketing Success Kit. The Making Money with Security program is the messaging and the security sales value proposition behind all that. And of course, you could use other messaging in an event, but I found that the Making Money with Security message is the most compelling and delivers the highest conversion rate. Now, the House, the Cloud, and the Coverage model was named, the House in the Cloud book is really the House, the Cloud, and the Coverage model, or in this framework, it's actually 3 questions: the House, the Cloud, and the Coverage model. It's 4 pieces, and these 4 pieces, you know, 95% of the time, when Nate Freeman, when I interviewed him last week, he commented several times, I'm surprised when this doesn't work, because it always works. And every once in a while, if something's not, you know, if I don't do it right or something like that, you know, I don't get the response I'm looking for, I'm kind of like surprised, because it always works. And I'll tell you what, my success rate with this has been very, very high. Well, that's why the conversion's been so high, because it works. Now, this framework consists of 3 questions, a House, a Cloud, and a Coverage model. Okay, so I'm going to take you through these things very quickly and show you how they work. First of all, the 3 questions. Okay, the first question comes up, and I'm going to just take you through this kind of like, I want to give you an example. I want to go back to that firewall opportunity that I had years ago when this really first started to gel. and use that as the example because it is just a great example. Okay, it's a firewall upgrade, and the IT organization does not want the upgrade. Okay, so I've got this lead, quote lead, handed to me by a manufacturer, vendor, partner who says, here's someone who has to upgrade their firewall, and they want a quote, and we'd like to convert them to our product, and here's a lead, right? So your job, your mission is to drive 4 hours from here, meet with their IT person, convince them to convert to our brand firewall, and sell it. Okay, and you're going to get like 10 points of margin on this, which you and I know is not even worth making the drive, right? So it's not what we did. Instead, we used a process that I go through in some detail in the Making Money with Security toolkit here. I show how we got access to that decision maker. I don't have time to go through that here today, but I do that in some detail. And it worked. It got us to the executive vice president of operations for that organization. And so when I sat down with that person as well as the IT person, and there was also an IT director in the room at the same time, the first thing I did was move away from the firewall conversation and ask that executive, what are you really trying to protect here in this organization? And they started to share with me. Now, the IT person wanted to answer here, but we don't want to hear network, firewall, data center, disk. We want to hear what data and what things are really essential. What kind of company secrets are you really trying to protect here? What's important? And so that person began to share, as a financial institution, some of the things that they're really trying to protect. And when they finished that, it took them like 20 minutes to do this, and they did all the talking. I'm just like taking notes feverishly here. When they were done, I said, well, what threatens that stuff? Like, what are you afraid of? And I'm thinking, is it contractors? Is it competition? Is it people overseas? Is it nation-state sponsored attacks? Is it, what is it? And so he began to talk about some of the people who have access to this data. They were doing a lot of third-party processing, and they've got contractors on site and so forth. And so he gave me about 10 minutes on that. And then I said, well, how comfortable are you with your ability to detect and respond before something happens, before something bad happens? And I think he looked over at his IT person, and I said, well, I'm not interested in the IT person's response here because you're liable for this. How comfortable are you right now with your ability to know what's going on out there? And he said, well, not very. I don't really know. I don't even know how to answer that question. Security works. Have you ever thought about how security works? And security works on this impact likelihood thing, right? We understand impact, and I've already talked about this. I won't go into detail, but I go into a lot of detail in the toolkit here because it's critical to really understand and be able to operate with this thing and convert the sale. Okay? But how does security work? So I got up and I drew a house on the board. And I said, let's talk about a physical structure out there like your house. And let's talk about how you secure your home. Okay? So this is the house in the cloud. It's your house. And the question is, how do you secure your house? And so we started to list things on the board, on the whiteboard. So I'm standing up, he's sitting down, and I'm asking him in the group, anyone, what do you do to secure your house? And they're saying things like, well, we've got fences and doors and locks and windows and alarms and dogs and, well, we're in South Carolina at the time. We got handguns, all kinds of stuff. And so when we listed all that stuff on the board, we came out with a list like this: doors, windows, locks, fence, alarm, motion detection, crime watch, monitoring, dogs, guns, police, insurance. Okay, 12 things. And I said, this is what we've been taught. This is what we believe to be securing our home or whatever it is we're doing. But all security works exactly the same, whether it's house security or it's digital security or it's a bank or it's a military installation or it's a prison, an office building like the one we're in right now. All these things operate on the same principle, and these things that I've listed, the doors, the windows, the motion detection, the dogs, the guns, these are not what secure your home. But we've always been told they are. And of course, they had a puzzled look on their face at this point. And I drew lines between the doors, windows, locks, fence, and the alarm, motion detection, crime watch, monitoring, and between the dogs, guns, police, and insurance. So I've got 3 groups of 4. I draw the cloud. The cloud is the third component of the matrix, and in the cloud, I'm showing them what the networks look like. If we look at today's networks, we got your private network, your trusted network, and we've got the cloud out there, the internet. Not the cloud, application, but the internet. And of course, the internet is completely open, and hopefully your personal network is secure at some level. But what's securing it? Firewalls, VPNs, or encryption, passwords. And what is that? All that stuff is protection column 1 stuff. And then the last piece of this is the coverage model. This is what security ought to look like. Protection, detection, response across the top, and then down the side of a matrix, a 3x3 matrix, we have administrative, technical, and physical. And so in the 9 boxes that sit among these headings, we've got things that are protection and administrative, or detection and technical, or detection and physical, or response and technical. And we're able to fill this in, but we don't fill it in the meeting. We just show them this is what it ought to look like. But most of our decisions, including the meeting I was in at that moment, was focused on picking out a firewall, which is a protection technical, but without the 9-box matrix in place. And so there are 5 critical components of marketing. They are simple, concrete, disruptive, credible, emotional. Simple, concrete, disruptive, credible, emotional. It turns out that all sales are emotional, and there's a lot of reasons why. I explained a little bit about how to work those emotions in a sales process in the Making Money with Security Kit. I go into a little bit of the biology of how the mind thinks and how it processes information, including your presentation, which shows you how it needs to be presented. Now, I'm not talking about manipulation here. I'm just talking to you about what works. You know, when Hollywood puts together a movie, what works? You can take 2 movies that are both factual and present one way, and nobody will watch it, and present it another way, and everyone will watch it, and it will get high ratings. But it needs to be visual. That's what concrete means. So concrete means they can see it. So when I talk about ports and layers and protocols, they can't see it. But when I talk about homes and protection, detection, response, and dogs and guns and things like that, they can see it. And as I create this emotional picture, I'm able to move through. And that it's got to be urgent. That's what I'm looking for in the assessment. I'm looking for the urgency. Can you imagine if you had a pipe leaking in your wall and you sensed that it was leaking, maybe you heard it, you call the plumber comes over, investigates, and determines, sure enough, there's a pipe in the wall that's leaking. And so he comes back to you and he says, you know, I really think there is a pipe in there leaking. Let me go back to the office and get together with my guys. We'll put together some options, a proposal for you, and I'll send that to you on Monday. What are you going to do? Are you going to wait until Monday? No, your house might be completely dissolved. You know, today's houses are built on sheetrock, and it just dissolves when there's water, and then mold is going to grow in there, and it's going to be a disaster, and it's urgent, like a pipe burst. Well, if data truly is leaking out of the organization right now, is that more critical or less than a pipe? Work, products, services, everything. Now, how do we get that opportunity? We have to create the opportunity to give this message, this kind of messaging, to the executive in an urgent way. And that's what educational marketing is about. And there's a lot of ways to do it, but cold calling is not the way to do it. You can start out with some kind of campaign, even using landing pages and sending them different things, sending them a recording of an interview with a security specialist, or sending them a book like my Data at Risk book. These things were built to get people thinking about it. And then inviting some of the technical people to webinars is good, but executives to lunch and learn. So you don't want to invite technical people to lunch and learns because it's too costly and they're not able to convert to what you need. But if I invite the technical people to educational webinars, educational, and I invite the executives to lunch and learns, and I use the event marketing lunch and learn process in the Success Kit, it shows you how to convert everybody through to the assessment and how to convert the assessment to the project then. Okay? And what I'm doing is I'm casting a net wide and I'm pulling these people in through different means to get to the point where I've got an asset owner in a live meeting, whether it's a lunch and learn event or it's a briefing inside a company or some other kind of small group meeting that allows me to move those people, to quantify those people and kind of parse my audience and get to the people that really matter and move forward with the assessment on those people.